Gramagat ceann Comhairle agus 100 míle fáilte Uachtarán Juncker. On my own behalf and on behalf of Sinn Féin, I wish to extend a very warm welcome to you on your heroic return to the City of Dublin. You asked us to hang and weigh each of your words carefully, and I have followed your advice. And so I'm happy to respond as we meet at this crucial time for Ireland in the course of Brexit negotiations. And as has already been reflected, Brexit is perhaps the greatest threat or challenge to our island in a generation. It's a threat to our peace agreements, to our peace process, to our stability, to our prosperity, and to the rights of our citizens, south and north, north and south. The potential for Brexit to cause jobs, to damage our industry, to damage and endanger the welfare of our people could not, in my view, be overstated. In my view also, Brexit is best understood as a Tory vanity project. It certainly was not designed to emancipate the masses. Any suggestion of that in relation to the Tories, who regarded, I'm sure you recall, President Juncker, as the Working Time Directive as a menace to democratic freedoms, any assertion that such a political mindset had any intention really of making a difference for the working class and the common good in Britain or anywhere else, I think is entirely misguided. However, I have to say this. We need to acknowledge that mistakes and failures in the European project bolstered the arguments of those who argued for Brexit, and they succeeded. I would say to you, President Juncker, that the economic dogma of the market above all else has alienated citizens, and I think we need to acknowledge that. The increasing militarisation of our union, the democratic deficit, the distance between the core and the periphery, the distance between larger states and smaller states, the onward march to federalisation by stealth. All of these things are legitimate matters of concern. And I think now the case for reform, for a very radical reform, is now unanswerable. And it's not simply a case of more Europe. It is, in fact, a plea for better Europe, for a Europe that commits itself to social solidarity, to democracy, to fair play, to a sense that the citizens are in charge, that they have ownership of this thing that we call the European project. And I believe for that to happen, the establishment, the politicians need to give way and to make space. And I can only hope that when we reflect on the experience of Brexit, that actually we will have the collective wisdom, from whatever political perspective we come, to collectively reflect and to take Shaw's advice, that to mark progress we need to challenge our thinking, and that Europe on many central issues needs to change not just its mind, but to change its direction. However we come at these things, I think we can agree that Brexit is a disaster, particularly for those of us in Ireland. The Tory Brexiteers had their entire debate without any reference at all to Ireland. And this arrogant and detached attitude has persisted in these negotiations. Mrs May and her government have yet to put forward any realistic or workable proposals. Instead, the Brexit policy of the British government remains littered with long-standing contradictions. The Tories claim that they are committed to avoiding a hard border, yet they remain intent on dragging the north of Ireland out of the European Union, out of the customs union and the single market. They claim that there is no threat to the Good Friday Agreement, whilst undermining that very agreement and ignoring the fact that there are some 142 areas of cross-border cooperation that will be adversely impacted. The British government insists that the rights of people living in the north will not be eroded. That is frankly disingenuous, as they insist that they leave the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice and, perhaps worse, set out a scenario of withdrawing from the European Convention on Human Rights and that court. And we in Sinn Féin have highlighted these fundamental contradictions many times, not least when our friend Michel Barnier addressed these houses. That was over a year ago, and yet these matters remain unresolved to this day. And the outworking of these unresolved contradictions in British policy is absolutely clear. As it stands, the British position would impose a hard border on our island. That is a fact. As it stands, the British position would erect barriers in terms of east-west trade. That is a fact. As it stands, British policy is to undermine and damage the Good Friday Agreement. That is a fact. These are regrettable and unacceptable facts. Last December, the people of Ireland were told that we had a cast-iron guarantee, that all of what I have described wouldn't happen, that in the event of a no-deal scenario that there would be no hard border on our island, no diminution of citizens' rights, no damage to the Good Friday Agreement. The backstop was to be our insurance policy, to prevent the imposition of WTO trading rules if negotiations ended without a comprehensive agreement. We were told that this draft agreement would be converted into a legally binding text in March. This didn't happen. The British government delayed, they distracted with nonsensical non-proposals, and they refused to commit. So instead, earlier this month, as a last-minute effort, perhaps to spare their blushes, the British government dream up another proposal that would in fact scrap the backstop proposal agreed in December and leave our island with zero legal assurances. Now, President Juncker, I'm sure I don't have to say to you that it is absolutely essential that we have not just words and kind sentiment. We need legal protection. I want to ask you to please publish the promised annex to the backstop that would set out the protection of citizens' rights. That is in the gift, I understand, of the European side, and I think it would be helpful and reassuring for us to see it. Sinn Féin has argued, and indeed there is, as has been said, a wide consensus as to what Ireland needs. We need the North to remain within the customs union and the single market. We need to ensure that the rights of citizens, particularly citizens living in the north of Ireland, are protected and acknowledged. And we need to ensure, irrespective of the wilder ramblings and rantings of the exotic Tories, that our peace agreement is respected in full. Every letter, every dot, every comma. President Juncker, I am happy to hear you reiterate a stance that Ireland comes first, a policy of Ireland first. But I have to say to you that I met with the British Prime Minister yesterday, and she sets out a policy of Ireland last, if at all. It seems to me now clear that British policy and tactics is to run down the clock, to delay and delay again. And I have to tell you that I am most disappointed, we are most disappointed, that despite an assurance that the Irish question would be answered in advance of agreeing or setting out the detail of the new relationship that Britain wishes to foster with the European Union, that in fact that has not happened. I think it is dangerous for us. I think it brings jeopardy to us if the British are allowed to go into the Council meeting at the end of this month, refuse to agree, refuse to answer the Irish question, and emerge with something of a diplomatic triumph in saying that we now move to the next phase of the negotiations. I have shared that view very explicitly with our colleagues in government. And I believe at the Council meeting the British government now needs to be called out on their antics. And that position that you state, President Juncker, of Ireland first, that needs to be explicitly stated to Mrs May, and it needs to be made clear that they will not roll in the Irish question into their new relationship in an attempt to pressurise this country into accepting a bad deal and potentially a calamitous deal for the island of Ireland. The Brexiteers, it's clear, still can't agree what Brexit means, much less what it looks like. That's their problem. It's not going to be, it cannot be our problem. And the upcoming Council meeting can't simply be another exercise in kicking the can down the road. It is now crunch time. In the absence of the British demonstrating how they avoid a hard border, how they uphold the Good Friday Agreement, how they protect citizens' rights, I think it is reckless to allow talks to progress to the next phase. And I would ask you, President Juncker and Mr Barnier, to please not make that mistake, because, to be clear, the future of the people living on this island is on the line, and history will not judge kindly anybody who decides to ignore the import of this reality. History remains the business of tomorrow, and it can be shaped by the things and the decisions that we make today. The present provides us with the opportunity to do the right thing and the responsible thing. And that position of Ireland first, articulated by Donald Tusk and by yourself, President Juncker, must now be the guiding principle for the European Union team. Ireland first and Ireland now. That's the duty of the European Union and the Irish Government. And I hope that you do not blink, and I hope that you fulfil that mission.
Thank you very much.